This show is part of the Proclaim Podcast Network, thoughtfully crafted, faithfully told stories that proclaim His name. More at proclaim.fm.
Hey everybody, this is Paul Hastings here, your host of Compelled, coming to you with our State of Compelled Address 2026. This is a tradition that we started last year. And when I say a tradition, it just means that I started doing it last year and I'm going to do it again this year. So now it's officially a tradition. And it's just me kind of bringing you this stream of consciousness, updating you on what we did last year, what we plan to do this year coming in front of us. And this is not very edited. In fact, it's me sitting here in my bedroom. I am actually sitting underneath a blanket, believe it or not, because that's what podcasters do when they're in very echoey spaces. And so hopefully everything will turn out just fine here. And hopefully I won't overheat underneath this blanket right now because it is quite warm. Last year in 2025, man, we were busy and there was so much that we did that was all enabled by you, our listeners. And so here's kind of the report on what we did. First thing is we released 12 new testimonies, or maybe it was 11, I can't quite remember. We released these stories, and here's just a summary of all of them. And maybe you've already listened to all of them. Great. We'll just recap them for you to hear now. But if you haven't listened to them, then maybe some of these will spark your interest or curiosity, and you can go check out those testimonies. The first story was with Stephen Matamoros, who grew up as a Jehovah's Witness with a distorted view of God. But through a crumbling marriage and heartbreaking loss, he encountered the true God of the Bible, who promised to always be by Stephen's side, even in the darkest of times. And that was actually truly tested in his life. The second interview that we released was with Ron Husband, who grew up in California during the 1950s and 60s. And he'd heard about Jesus, but he'd also heard about flying saucers and ancient civilizations. You know, what was the truth? And would this truth have any bearing when he was invited to draw moving pictures for this random children's company called Disney? And, you know, that episode was a lot of fun to work on. I remember especially one particular scene where we were working on the music. Love that one. Then we had a two-part series with Lori Apod. Actually, Lori is one of our listeners, actually. She met the love of her life at a Christian concert. This guy named Bobby. He was a young, dashing man who sang songs for God's glory, and he was a founding member of the Christian music group New Song that many of you may have listened to, and he swept Lori off her feet. But then at the wedding altar, both of them were in bondage to sin. What or who could set them free? And that's another episode. I really loved working on the music for that one, actually, because Lori gave us access to several of her husband's original songs from way back in the day. We had footage from her wedding ceremony that we were able to incorporate it as well. A really, really cool episode. Loved working on the music on that one. Then we had a story from Laddie Calloway. He was a street fighter and drug dealer in Florida. After being declared a fatality from a gang shooting, Laddie's life continued to spiral out of control until he remembered the seeds of faith that had been planted by his childhood church. Then we heard from Marianne Sanford, who actually goes to my church. Marianne grew up surrounded by cults and drugs, yet tried to make her own way through life and felt that she was a good person, but didn't realize how far from the mark she truly was, or how close God had been every step of the way. Then we shifted gears and heard from Tom Rudelius. Tom was a top student at an Ivy League school. He was triple majoring in physics, math, and statistical science, and had never given much thought to God. Maybe God existed, maybe not, but there probably wasn't any real way to tell. But then one day, Tom began looking for proof and ended up finding faith. Then we heard from Jerry Jameson. She was a drug addict. She hated her life and wanted to stop using, but she couldn't kick the habit. But then one night, she cried out in desperation to a God she wasn't even sure existed, and he answered. Jerry, by the way, is one of our other Compelled listeners, and I loved hearing Jerry's testimony the first time that she just contacted us and said, hey, I've been listening to her show for a while. Here's my written testimony. Tell me what you think. I think I reached out like a couple weeks later, or maybe it was the same week, I forget. And then lo and behold, there we were recording. Then we heard from Dakota Lynch. Dakota grew up with a terrible, abusive father who hated God. Yet despite that horrible role model, Dakota learned to trust in a good father whose love was unconditional and whose plan for the future was made even more beautiful by the past. And there's a beautiful twist to that story. Then we heard from Jonathan Carswell. Jonathan grew up in a Christian home and could explain the gospel forwards and backwards, but it held no actual power in his personal life. Then one day, the scales fell off his eyes, and Jonathan saw Jesus for who he truly was, which put into motion a revolution in the world of Christian publishing. And finally, in 2005, Hurricane Katrina slammed into New Orleans with a fury the city had never seen before. Fanny Scott was there in the middle of the storm, where she experienced both fear for her life, but also the profound peace of God. And that was our joy to release that on the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. Those are the stories that were released this last year. Now, you may have noticed, like, hey, the year before that, in 2024, you guys released 20 stories. Why not 20 stories in 2025? And part of that is because we had a personal family emergency last year. It actually began, well, there's a long story, and I'm not going to go into all of it in the details right now. Maybe Sarah and I might do a special episode someday in the future, maybe next year, about that personal family emergency. But the story's still kind of ongoing right now. Anyway, so we were kind of derailed off of our plans. We actually launched season 10 and got 2 episodes out. And then just in August, we just paused everything. But the good news is that we are back on track to release 20 episodes this year, right now in 2026. And I'm going to tell you about those stories in just a moment. But before I do that, let me just read you a couple of real-life impact stories. We get messages from our listeners all the time telling us how they were impacted by the stories on Compelled. And I think it's just important that we celebrate those short little messages that we get, because it's just kind of a way to tell our team, like, hey, God is actually using these stories, continue making them. But then also a way to sort of thank you, our listeners, for telling your friends or for giving us the funds to enable us to continue making these stories. So here's just a handful of these impact stories we got. And actually, I think all of these stories, I think I've gotten all these little messages here in the last 5 weeks, I think. All right, here's the first message. This is from Laura in Canada. She wrote, I just heard about your podcast in November of 2025. My 18-year-old sister-in-law had just been diagnosed with a brain tumor. Of course, that sent us all reeling. We really saw the Lord's hand in the whole thing, though, because she was in for surgery 2 weeks and a day after her diagnosis. We were all shocked when the surgeon offered the surgery date so soon and wanted to do one last outing together as a family before surgery, as we had no idea how she would come through. We decided to do a short hike together. And as we were driving there, she suggested that we listen to this podcast that she had recently discovered, which was Compelled. So that was the first time I heard it. Now it's my go-to while I'm cleaning, cooking, driving, etc. She came through the surgery successfully and is recovering quite well. Thanks for all you do. And I just thought that was a really special message. So thank you, Laura, for letting us know. And extend our greetings to your sister-in-law. We're so grateful to hear that her surgery has gone through successfully, and we are hoping and praying for her continued recovery. Here is another message we got from a listener. It says, this is so funny. Just today, I poured out my soul to my friend and pastor about my struggle with media. I love to watch TV, and the Lord spoke to me about it. So I started only watching Christian content and listening to Christian music for over a year. Lately, I started not watching bad movies or anything, but true crime episodes. And God again told me to stop. I cried out to him and asked, what am I supposed to do? What can I watch? These Christian things don't satisfy whatever this is. My friend just today told me to start listening to podcasts. I came upon Compelled in my searches. I listened to an episode about a man who was abused by his mom and deserted by his dad and got saved, and all that changed. At the end, you read an anonymous email you received, and a woman spoke about the exact same thing I just told my friend and pastor. She had media issues just like me, and a friend told her to listen to podcasts, and she found Compelled. And like me, she had started watching true crime. What are the chances but God? I am thankful I found your podcast, and if I needed any confirmation from the Lord, I got it. Media and the feeling of disappearing into a movie is a stronghold that the enemy has successfully used to lull our spirits into a false sense of comfort. Thank you for reading her email. It has done more for me than you know. God is always speaking, and I want to always be listening. Thank you. And of course, I just thought, like, wow, that felt kind of meta. but also, again, just exceptional. We were so glad to get that first email from, a few years ago that we read, and then to hear that God was using that to bless someone now, that was really cool too. Here's another message we got from a listener in Loma Rica, California. This morning, I listened to Dr. Hormoz Shariat's testimony for the second time. It had a huge impact on me. I realized that I'm carrying a big burden of anger inside, and it's eating me alive. There's no room for the love of Christ. My father was a card-carrying communist and was full of anger for Christians and conservatives. Now, I'm the opposite, hating liberals. I can't be an effective witness this way. If Dr. Shariat can love his enemies, surely I should be able to love mine. Wow, that was a really meaningful message for us to get there. Also, just kind of knowing like, hey, God used Dr. Shariat's story, which again, for those that may need a refresher, he was a man in Iran who once chanted death to the Americans, death to the Shah. But then the Lord changed his life, and today he operates this incredible satellite ministry broadcasting the gospel to people in Iran today. And just the chance that his story was able to affect this one listener, that was really cool. All right, here's one last message we got, and I'll just read this one here. Jeanette writes, please pray along with me for my former neighbor who is 92 and an unbeliever. His first name is Donald. I have witnessed to him for 12 years and gave him a copy of your book, and he's already read the first testimony. I am very surprised. I thought he would balk at the book. I am burdened for his salvation and asking the Holy Spirit to use these testimonies to draw him to the kingdom of God. He said in an email that he would become a believer if God had sent a lightning bolt to fry the prosecutor who didn't turn in the evidence that would have helped Hannah Overton to avoid jail sentencing. And by the way, this is kind of my aside here. I love his desire there. Maybe a little misguided there in his sense of justice there. But hey, at least he read it. Okay, back to the email. Regardless, at least he's read one testimony and dialoguing with me about it. And again, it's from our listener, Jeanette. Wow, that's really cool. And yes, we are now praying for this guy named Donald, who's the 92-year-old unbeliever. And I hope all of you guys right now, if you're listening right now, can you take take a minute here and pray for Donald? He's 92 and doesn't know the Lord. And yet he's read at least one chapter for the Compelled book. He's got a great neighbor, Jeanette, who's sharing the gospel with him. The Lord can still tarry. Well, let's pray that God works in Donald's life. Anyways, those are just 4 messages that we've gotten in the last 5 weeks. What a joy. What a joy to get those. For those of you who are number-centric folks, let me just kind of share some stats with you about what we did in this last year in 2025, okay? So Compelled, we did around 909,000 downloads. So just shy of 1 million. Man, we are so close. I think we're going to get to 1 million downloads this year in 2026, but I guess we'll wait and see what the Lord has. We also recorded 20 interviews last year, and yeah, we're working on editing those right now. You're going to hear a bunch of those this year, actually. We also launched our radio program almost exactly a year ago, back on February 2nd. That's on American Family Radio, 170 stations, 34 states, 500,000 listeners. Our time slot is 2:05 p.m. Central Time to 3 p.m. And yeah, we launched that. We also remastered 32 episodes from our archives and got those prepped for radio release. So that was fun. And of course, anything new that we created for Compelled, the podcast, we also put on the radio program as well. And then we also launched our top secret project that I'd been teasing, which was the Compelled book, with wonderful endorsements from Lee Strobel and Marvin Lasky and Ginger Hubbard. Last I heard, the publisher, I believe, has sold, 20,000 copies. I've heard about listeners who have been handing these out to homeless folks in California. We got a message from a lady who's been handing out these books in a prison book study that she's doing in Mississippi. And we got pictures of 15 prisoners holding the Compelled book as they've been reading the stories in there and reflecting on what God's doing in their lives. We also launched a 501c3 nonprofit called Compelled Ministries, which is now a tax-deductible option for those who need that or have an employer who wants to make a matching contribution. And then we also launched the Proclaim Podcast Network the year before that. Now, that was in 2024. And that was really our opportunity to say, hey, Compelled is not the only highly produced storytelling testimony podcast out there. There are other great storytelling podcasts made by faithful Christians. And we want to celebrate those. And so we created the Proclaim Podcast Network as a way to kind of put everyone underneath the same discovery umbrella. So there's 4 shows that were in the network. That's Compelled, Exempla, God Out Loud, and Story Partners. And together, the other shows, not Compelled, but the other shows collectively did, I think, just under 200,000 downloads combined, which is, I think, basically triple of what they did the year before that. And then also, in the last month of December, we also launched the Surround Bible podcast made by some friends of ours. And that was an incredible podcast. If you have not checked it out, please do so. There's 2 episodes out so far. And it's basically a word-for-word retelling of the Bible. So every word that you hear in the Surround Bible is taken straight from Scripture. It's in the drama category. I think they've got like a 30-person cast in it, original music. It's amazing, great sound design, and it's straight from the Bible. It's awesome. They've got a special Christmas episode is out so far, but they have a vision to do the entire Bible. And I think they actually jumped to like number 28 in the U.S. Apple drama podcast category. And that's like out of 11,000 other drama podcasts. So they were number 28 when they launched. That's really cool. If you want to check out the other shows that are part of Proclaim, just check out our website. It's proclaim.fm. Also, we went to conferences. My wife and I, we went to the Texas Homeschool Convention. I was invited to be the MC there. We'll be there this coming year too, actually. So if you want to see me or see my wife, actually, she's a much more interesting person than I am. We also went to the Christian Missionary and Alliance Gathering in Columbus, Ohio. We went to the Sing Conference in Nashville, Tennessee. And then I just got back from CrossCon in Louisville, Kentucky, just a couple weeks ago. Those were all great events. We got to tell a lot of people about Compelled and continue spreading the word. If you want to get more details, by the way, about all the stuff we've been up to this year, as well as numbers and quotes and all that stuff, we actually have a page on our website. It's right at the very top. It's called the Impact 2025. So just check out that Impact 2025 report, and you can see everything that we've been up to there. Let's see here. Personal update. Well, I already told you we had a kind of this family health emergency in our family this year. That's going to be another story for another time. But as a result of that, we actually ended up moving houses about an hour away. So we were on the west side of Austin, Texas. Now we're on the east side of Austin, Texas. We're crazy closer to our church, though. So that was a wonderful thing. And we're now in a house. Prior to this, we've been in a single-wide mobile home for the last 10 years. And let me tell you, we got 4 little kids, ages 2, 4, 6, 8. And it is very hard sometimes to record audio when they're making a lot of noise. And so I had to record a ton of the audio in the middle of the night, like at 1 a.m. Well, not 1 a.m. I have done that before. And that just gets really hard because, we had one room for my wife and I, one room for the kids, all 4 kids in one room, and then one room for the podcast office. But now, no longer. We have moved, and there's a boys' room, there's a girls' room, there's a parents' room, and soon there will be a podcast office room. I'll tell you more about that in a second here. And another thing to celebrate is I've been podcasting now full-time on Compelled for 3.5 years, since July 2022. So, wow, so great. Now, let's talk about this year, 2026, right now. What are we planning to do now in 2026? Well, of course, the first thing is we are planning on relaunching Season 10 in February. In fact, go put in your calendar now. February 10th, that is the launch date. If we could just stay on schedule, that will be the launch date for our new Season 10. And we're going to publish 10 episodes every other week. So that'll go right through mid-June. So February 10th through mid-June. And then, the Lord willing, the plan for Season 11 will be this fall, starting in mid-August. That'll be another 10 episodes wrapping up just before Christmas. All right, let me just tell you about some of the stories we are planning to release. And of course, this is always subject to change because sometimes we'll record a new story and we'll be like, oh man, let's put that in and slot this one and we'll move that around. But here's just a handful of the stories. Here's 6 stories. We've already recorded these. These are in various stages of editing right now. Brittany was young and successful. Her party friends nicknamed her Blackout Brittany because she loved to drink. But then one fateful night, she drove head-on into the wrong lane of traffic and caused a tragedy that she could never have imagined. Could God really forgive her, much less want her? Another story with Ben Browning. He was the new pastor of a small church in Mississippi. He and his congregation mutually loved and cared for each other until he decided to marry a woman from another ethnicity, and his peaceful flock rebelled. What was God asking him to do? We have another story with Kayla. Kayla was a young woman who was redeemed by Christ after being sexually abused for almost a decade. But then she had to grapple with how could forgiveness and justice coexist simultaneously in the same space. Then there was Marvin Alasky. He was a card-carrying American communist and atheist who couldn't wait to usher in a new era of equality and even tried to become an informant for the Russian KGB. But then one afternoon, he sat frozen in his chair while his brain raced unbidden. What if Lenin was wrong about God? We've got another story with Janet Darms. She was a brand new Christian who unintentionally joined a cult and blindly followed her leader into more and more bizarre situations until Christ made a way of escape for her. And lastly, we've got a story here with Granger Smith, a suicidal country music star who cried out to Jesus for help after his toddler drowned in their swimming pool. Only Christ could meet his need. Would he accept? That's what's been going on, guys. Those are the stories that we're planning to bring you this year. Of course, we're still working on the Proclaim Podcast Network. In fact, let me give a shout out here for just a handful of those other shows. Surround Bible, they are raising funds right now, this very moment, to record their Easter story. They're hoping to record 3 more episodes this week, I think, but they need to raise $42,000. I think last I heard they're about 14% of the way there. But they are hoping to record studios right now, studio time right now in California. So yeah, go check them out. Another one is Story Partners. I love their show. Story Partners, they are working on editing their next season right now. I think they're launching, I don't know if it's this summer or this spring, but they're launching pretty soon. Then there's God Out Loud. They are currently fundraising for season 3. And then Exempla, they are still publishing currently right now, actually. I just had a baby. All 4 of those shows, great shows. If you want to check them out, just go to proclaim.fm and you can find all the details there. This year, in 2026, we also have the opportunity to give away 10,000 copies of the Compelled book in Texas prisons this summer. There's a long story about how that's happening, but we're doing it with Syndeo Ministries. That actually represents, I think, about 83% of the entire female prison population in the Texas prison system. 83% of the entire female population in the Texas prison system. That's crazy. But the Lord has opened up this door for us to do that with Syndeo Ministries. It'll be this July. If you live in Texas and you want to come help out with that, which just means like, hey, you're going to be moving a lot of boxes and water bottles and books and stuff like that. Hey, let me know. Come and join us. That'll be this July. 10,000 copies. Now, there's still some stuff that has to happen to make that happen. Namely, we are raising funds to make that happen. But this was an opportunity that we didn't want to miss out for that. So, yeah, you can pray about that. We also are hoping to go to a handful of conferences this year. I already mentioned I went to CrossCon in Louisville, where I personally met with probably around 1,000 individual high school and college students and told them about Compelled and the testimonies that God is using to change people's lives. I'll also be at the Texas Homeschool Convention in Houston this summer. I think that's in May. And then I'll be at the Southern Baptist Convention in Orlando, Florida in June. And then possibly, not entirely certain, but possibly Sarah and I might be at a conference in Denver, Colorado this October, but not totally certain yet. Other things going on. We are building a recording studio for Compelled, and it's a Home Depot shed, okay? It's like a shed we bought from Home Depot, but we got it on Craigslist for like super cheap. It's like 200 square feet. We are going to turn this thing into an office. I've already got studs up. We've got a roof on it and everything because the shed was existing, but we've already kind of partitioned off some stuff there. There's a lot to do. I've got some electrical work done already. It's just time consuming, guys. But man, I'm also blessed that I've got friends at our church who are helping me out with this. And hopefully that'll be up and running here in just a few months. And then I won't have to sit underneath a blanket and record audio anymore. Because I'll tell you what, guys, it's starting to get pretty hot underneath this blanket right now. Let's see here. Fundraising. Okay, so we were raising funds for 2026. We were doing that all throughout Thanksgiving and Christmas season. And I'm happy to report that we have currently raised, as of this recording, just under $75,000 out of our $80,000 goal. So for those of you fast with that, that's around 94%. So we're 94% funded for this year. Of course, if you're giving monthly, please continue doing that. We are counting on those funds. But yeah, 94%. We are so grateful. Thank you, everyone who's made this possible. We would not be able to make Compelled without listeners just like you. So thank you. All right. Finally, 3 ways to be involved. 3 ways that we'd love to see you be involved with Compelled if you're interested. First one is, hey, please pray that God would give us wisdom and creativity as we select and edit our 20 episodes this year. That takes a lot of work and effort to just edit those. So please pray that God would keep me healthy, but also our lead editor, Will. Will is such a great dude. And if he ever got like really, really sick, guess what? No more episodes, okay? And when I get really, really sick and I can't record audio, guess what? There's no episodes, okay? So please pray that God would keep Will and I healthy, and also that he would keep our families healthy, and that also he would give us creativity in how to tell these stories so that they don't become redundant, but they continue to glorify God in the work that God has already done in these amazing stories. Second way to get involved, you can join our Compelled Insider email list for behind-the-scenes news. We are constantly incubating ideas and throwing out things that we're working on. So please join our email list. We try to keep the emails not super flooding your inbox, so we try to be considerate about that. And third thing is, if you'd like to join our prayer team, we've got about maybe 7 people on our prayer team, and it's just for a more specific, specialized email that we send out sporadically from time to time, and just about, hey, here's specific needs that we have. And okay, here's a fourth way to get involved also, is just keep telling your friends about Compelled. Tell them about the show. If you enjoy it, great. If you don't enjoy it, well, don't tell them about it, but you're probably not listening to this in that case either. That's pretty much it, guys. That is the State of Compelled 2026 edition. That's what we've been working on. That's what we're continuing to work on this year. We are so excited for these stories that God has placed in our grasp to share with you and the world. And we're so grateful for your partnership as well with us. And until then, we will talk very soon, and we'll see you guys on February 10th on our new episode.